Hey everyone, it's Ellis, and this is going to be the 9.18 patch notes rundown. And I have not looked at or heard any of the rumors surrounding the 9.18 patch notes in terms of what was maybe on the PBE. We're just going to jump right into it and take a look at if anything notable was changed. First up is going to be Aatrox. Passive now heals for less against minions. Q damage to minions reduced and flattened. Passive Deathbringer Stance heals for bonus physical damage dealt to anything. Heals for 25% of the damage dealt when stabbing a minion. Healing versus other targets unchanged. Q, the Darkened Blade. Damage to minions 50 to 100% to 40% at all levels. So Aatrox is getting hit quite hard. I know that I am probably one of the very few people that doesn't think that Aatrox is problematic. I think that while the champion's really good in lane in the sense that you can blind pick him, he goes up against everything in lane. I think that thematically and how he fits into most team compositions in pro play and super high, well, I guess maybe super high MMR it's a little bit different, but pro play, he's able to be answered really easily, I think. So it's not the best situation, and then Aatrox on red side will often leave much to be desired if he's coming in as a counter pick. I think that it more so would have to do with player comfort at that point and just not wanting to play a matchup where they're either expected to win or they have to go behind or something of that nature. I really am of the train of thought that Aatrox can be managed and sort of steered, or not steered, but played around if drafts and overall just champion pools of pro players were better. So really sad to see him nerfed. It is quite a sizable nerf as well. It gives a lot of champions ways to poke him out inside of the laning phase. I do think that this is a kind of nerf that can impact him large enough to make his laning phase against certain champions awkward as it is. And there's already some champions that do beat him in the laning phase, even though he is that blind pickable champion that can go up against almost the entire field. So it's just going to make those matchups even worse. Probably will have the effect of reducing Aatrox picks. Maybe some players are really stubborn and just don't want to let him go, but I feel like these kind of hits to his healing and the damage to minions with the Darkened Blade and whatnot, I feel like it's probably just going to be too much for him to realistically handle at super high MMRs. I don't think that this really affects super low MMR, mostly because you shouldn't probably be playing him at super low MMR. Darius and Malphite exist. Anyways, Akali R cooldown increased early, R1 stun removed, R2 base maximum damage decreased, R perfect execution. Akali no longer stuns her enemies for 0.5 seconds. R2 maximum damage is down by quite a lot, actually. That is a massive gut, which is really surprising. Cooldown is also up by 40 seconds at rank 1. Holy crap. So the one of the first thoughts is that the lesser common thing that'll happen here is Akali's ability to cancel channels and also cancel, obviously, teleport or something of that nature using her R1. The loss of all of this damage makes it a lot harder for her to threaten anything at level 6. But ultimately, if you get out of the laning phase and you're not picking Akali just for any sort of early game shenanigans, which most teams don't even really pick Akali for anyway, she usually doesn't have kill opportunity unless opponents really messed up, and so the loss of the damage on the rank 1 ultimate isn't that problematic because Akali isn't really team fighting until later stages anyway, in which case her damage is totally fine. I mean, missing 30 damage at rank 2, it doesn't really matter because Akali's going to overkill most of the targets, and for the targets that she's going in on and that she's not intending to overkill, usually there's some slippery nature about it where she's just trying to soften up things and play around her shroud and whatnot. So Akali's not going to be gutted by this change, but it is something that can definitely be felt, especially in high-end solo queue where solo kills are going to exist much more often with the rank 1W. So it's not the end of the world there. But anyways, Annie. E now grants decay and movement speed, damage reduction decrease, cooldown increase. So Riot actually reached out to me about this Annie change, which was really interesting. And my proposal was that the damage reduction didn't make any sense inside of her kit. It has almost no purpose. My suggestion was to change it to the old summoner spell Surge, where maybe while the Molten Shield is active, Annie gains, some amount of AP or something like that. But I was then met with the response that might cause a little bit too much power to be shifted into her, and so for the time being, this would end up being the change. Movement speed, Annie gains 25% plus 1.5% per level, decaying bonus movement speed over a 1.5 second duration. Damage reduction 16 to 40% to 10 to 22%. Let's be honest, no pro players are picking Annie, and there are a few Annie enthusiasts that do play her in solo queue. Most notably would be Cute Mao on Korea, probably the best Annie player in the world, and then obviously North America has AnnieBot, which is the most popular Annie player in the entire West. Cooldown 10 to 15 seconds now. So the damage reduction is almost never utilized. There's very, very thin instances where it's utilized because Tank Annie never really came to fruition ever. So the added movement speed is really nice for helping her in matchups that she's already going to be favorable in, but it's also really nice in matchups that she's bad in, where she has to rush boots early on and she has to rely on mobility and whatnot. And then obviously this helps her engages in the later stages of the game, where some Annies, they take stuff like Proto Belt for the mini dash and stuff to help out with Tibbers and whatnot. Some Annies take Predator as they need it in later stages of the game to engage and whatnot. So this is a nice little buff that maybe adds like 1.5 to 2% win rate or something to Annie. And, we're nearing the end of the season. And so for players that are trying to get the ranked rewards or something and you're trying to get gold, and you're down there in Iron, and you want to turn Iron into Gold within the next 2 months, and you're wondering, well, LS, how's that possible? I've been stuck in Iron for 600 games. Look no further than Annie. If you're a Silver player and you're wondering how do you win your promos that you failed for the 8th or 9th time, look no further than Annie. If you're a Gold player and you're struggling to win inside of Gold and you really want to get Platinum, Annie. If you're a, high diamond, mid diamond support player, and you actually want to try to play a laner, don't kid yourself. Annie's probably still too hard for you to play Malphite. No, but realistically, Annie is already really, really good at low MMR, and hopefully this buff puts her on the radar more for some players, and everything will be fine there. So Aurelion Sol base health increased, base stats 510 to 575. I actually don't know what the opinion is on Aurelion Sol after his little rework. Hold on, let me ask Autumn. Have you seen Aurelion Sol? Mm-hmm. How is he? Bad? All right, that's the verdict. So I don't think 65 HP at level 1 is magically going to change him from just apparently being bad. That was a very deep analysis right there by our friendly resident neighborhood Korean challenger player. Anyways, Caitlyn base attack damage increased, base stat 60 to 62. This is actually big because they keep trying to push Caitlyn, it seems, and I believe in a few recent patches she's been getting constant buffs. The meta in Korea is slowly even changing in a way that would potentially gravitate towards her. It's nice to see her get a buff. I don't know if 918 is the Worlds patch. I believe 919 is the Worlds patch, unless maybe there's something up here. No, this isn't the Worlds patch, right? So there's still potential hope that Caitlyn will get a little bit more love before... It doesn't necessarily just have to be a buff to Caitlyn, but we can also see indirect buffs to Caitlyn via items or maybe rune changes or something of that nature, or nerfs to other champions that are presently in the bottom lane. So we could potentially have Caitlyn come back. I really don't think that she's all that bad. There was even actually some spots, I believe, in the series that I just cast earlier on today. I cast 2 best of 5s with Atlas on the LCK for the LCK promotion matches, where I thought that Caitlyn would have been an okay pick in certain spots. And if you want to utilize her, don't think that she's really that bad. Ekko, W cost decrease, stun duration increase, W parallel convergence 50 to 70 mana to 30 to 50 mana, and stun duration 1.75 to 2.25. So I actually talked about Ekko recently on the LCK broadcast even, where I mentioned how there is a Chinese player that only plays Ekko on Korean solo queue ladder, Despite he has the ability to play other mid lane champions, his champion pool is not just Ekko when he plays competitive. Zhao Lon Bon, or I hope that I'm pronouncing that right. He only will play Ekko whenever he is playing on the Korean server and he's playing in ping, and his Ekko will always have 60-65% win rate over several hundred games in high Korean Challenger. The guy is undoubtedly the best Ekko player in the world, and I feel like if pro players could play Ekko even close to his ability to play Ekko, that Ekko would probably be a low S tier, high A plus tier champion in the mid lane. That I don't think people would be thinking that he necessarily needs buffs. And Ekko's received a few buffs in recent patches, so it's always nice to see that Riot's buffing some champions. And this you know what? This is actually really nice. I do hate the Aatrox change because I think this is more a byproduct of pro teams not learning how to punish champs like this. The Akali change I'm fine with. Annie buff is really nice. Aurelion Sol buff is nice. Caitlyn buff, Ekko buff, this is nice. Our Evelynn empower damage amplifier and max empower damage increased. I'm sorry, I said at the very beginning of this that I didn't know about anything that was maybe in 9.18, but now I do recall that Malice messaged me, I want to say 2 or 3 days ago, saying how hilarious it was that Riot apparently was buffing Evelynn because he thinks that Evelynn is in a perfectly fine state. And I think that Evelynn in competitive, she's really hard to play in the sense that your team has to know how to play with her. They need to know how to manipulate the lane states to be favorable for her. You have to know the spots in which she's going to be pickable. And then also she has such a unique jungle play style that other junglers don't really have. And if you weren't one of the junglers that used to play the old type of Evelynn and excel at her as well, probably not going to have the easiest time just magically picking her up. Even though she's very simple in a mechanical sense, she's an extremely cerebral jungler, and I think that's where a lot of teams coordinating around her will experience difficulty. So the Evelynn one-trick player thinks that the Evelynn buff was completely unnecessary and that it's ridiculous, and he doesn't understand why it happened, but that's going to be or he's not a one-trick, but Evelynn enthusiast is of the belief that Evelynn did not need the buff. Anyways, Jhin, base attack damage increased, base stats 57 to 59. Kaisa, E bonus attack speed decreased later, 40 to 80% to 40 to 60%. This is totally fine as well. Kayle, E base passive damage increased. E Starfire Spellblade 10 to 30 to 15 to 35. This is really sad. I actually had some talks with August on Twitter where we had just replied to each other inside of some tweets, and I remember specifically saying that one of the problems that Kayle is having right now is that all of her changes sort of shifted her towards more so being AP Kayle, but the problem is that the current Kayle, the break point is 400 AP, which is about 3 items deep. But then in addition to that, Kayle also wants to get CDR, and then she also needs attack speed. So already she needs Nashor's Tooth, and then she needs Death Cap. And it's a very awkward situation where that kind of a breakpoint threshold just doesn't really feel that good. And even though she can lane so much better now inside of the laning phase against champions that used to be a nightmare to go up against because of the way that they changed her level 6 and her level 11 and getting her a Risen or a Flame forms or whatnot, she still experiences the same exact problems that the old Kayle experiences, except it's even actually a little bit worse now because of such a heavy reliance on getting those AP items. And so I feel like they need to buff the ratio for Starfire Spellblade, or they need to do other things with her Q, something, or even a passive, that she needs more damage because she just doesn't feel really all that scary no matter what you try to do with her right now. Anyways, Lee Sin, base health and attack damage increased, R damage increased. This is a really nice one to see, but it's a really scary one as well because if some people remember, Lee Sin originally was nerfed because his base damage was too high and he would just show up in a lane, basically RQ, and you were essentially dead. So seeing the Lee Sin buffs before Worlds is always a really nice thing, though. He is an extremely flashy jungler, and I am always a huge fan of seeing buffs. Misfortune, E-Slow increased early, 28 to 60% to 40 to 60%. MF is a champion that I know that Korea was potentially trying to play around April and May, who was really, really, really popular in scrims, 80 carry Misfortune. And then she disappeared, and she never ended up making it to the big stages. I do think that MF support does have potential to be picked in very situational spots, and so I don't think that that's anything that is out of consideration by any means, and I think this is an absolutely massive buff to get a 12% extra slow at rank 1 on Make It Rain. So really loving all of these buffs in patch 9.18. Nunu and Willem base stats decreased. E-Slow now scales. Health growth 90 to 82, armor growth 3.5 to 3, mana 283 to 280, mana region 7.44 to 7, E-Snowball Barrage slowed 50% to 30 to 50%. So Nunu's an interesting thing. Apparently, he's really good in solo queue, or I believe I saw a thread on Reddit about that, but the reality of the situation is the champion is an absolute dumpster fire, so I'm not really sure. I'm not interested in building a snowman. Oh, these are just quality of life changes. Okay, Q and W quality of life changes are mushroom adjustments with more charges and infinite bounce. Q blinding dart. Blinded target will now see a green light around their screen when they are affected by Teemo's Q. That sucks. W, move quick. Move quick's ability icon will now have a bar above it to show when it's active, okay? R, Noxious Trap. Mushrooms will now trigger more responsibly, especially on enemies dashing through them quickly. Rift Scuttler no longer triggers mushrooms when it's not in combat. This one is really big, although you can just tap the Rift Scuttle to clear out wards, or to clear out Noxious Traps that are around. Max charges 3 mushrooms at all ranks to 3, 4, 5. This doesn't really matter because good Teemos are almost always just placing mushrooms. There's almost never a case where you get up to holding 3 mushrooms in the first place. So this is actually a placebo buff right here. So leaving much to be desired there with the Teemo changes. Warwick W now properly, that's great. Xayah, base armor decreased, R cooldown increased. Armor is down by 3, R Featherstorm 140 to 110 to 160 to 130. It's absolutely fantastic when some ADCs can terrorize the meta for months on end, but Xayah starts to show her head just a little bit. She gets smacked within one patch. It's really impressive. Anyways, Zoe. Passive damage increase. Zoe's early lane phase is weaker than intended right now, so we're propping that up without increasing her one-shot burst, okay? More sparkles, 10 to 124 scaling. Now, let's look at her laning phase amounts, right? So we're mostly looking at the 10 to 24, which now becomes 16 to 32, which is really, really big on her passive. This adds a little bit of extra oomph to her laning phase. I was actually having a conversation a little bit earlier on when I got back from the LCK about Zoe. She actually came out yesterday in the LCK coupled with the Ezreal, and through a divine intervention still managed to lose the game. But nonetheless, I do think that Zoe is good. I think that a lot of players have forgotten about Zoe, and that she does have the potential to pop back up around the Worlds play-ins or Worlds group stages or something if people actually do try to dedicate some time to playing her. So Zoe's pretty good. Getting the extra damage in the early laning phase and whatnot. She's also received some indirect buffs by the meta changes that have surrounded her in recent months in terms of champions that have come in and come out of the meta. And so she's doing really good in that department. So no other real major changes. We just, we're going to take a look at anything else. Video accessibility options, okay. We have skins, and then we have chromas. So before I get to the most important part of the patch rundown, which is the skins and the chromas, let's take a look at the recap. So Aatrox is probably going to be massively hit in pro play. I do think that some stubborn people will maybe still try to play him, but I already thought Aatrox was not a very good champion, despite his extremely heavy pick ban presence across all regions. I never thought that he was insane, or I don't believe that he was worthy of the title that people were giving him, even though I acknowledge that he was a very, very good champion. Akali, it's not the end of the world. Akali players that are still picking Akali, or team compositions where Akali is being picked, is not going to care about the rank 1 change, because Akali, in most cases, is not going to straight up kill you with her rank 1 R unless you really, really misstep And so you're mostly just looking at the rank 2, in which case not enough power has really been removed, and so Akali's still going to be fine. Obviously, the stun is a little bit obnoxious, but I imagine that it would be an extremely thin, or I imagine the situations where it comes into play will be extremely few. Annie buff is really nice for solo queue. I'm expecting like a 1.5–2% win rate increase, and I think that Riot, I think it's really nice that they're trying to give a lot of players the opportunity to get the end of season rewards in gold, if they will if they will be intelligent enough to pick the light here and just guide themselves to the golden kingdom. Aurelion Sol buff, apparently it does not matter with the description that Autumn just gave me, which was it was pretty deep. He was bad. Caitlyn buffs, I don't think that she's out of the woods yet for sure, but I do think that she is pickable. Ekko ended up getting a buff. I still don't think that anyone's really going to play him. I just want to bring up every single time I see the Ekko changes that there is that player that can make Ekko an S-tier champion. And so it's sort of like one of those spots where you just have to wait for pro players to follow through with it. We've seen this with several champions now in the past as well. Most recently would be Volibear, I guess, where one-tricks are initially what got the pro players on the hype train. Evelynn is already in a really, really good spot. This R is not really that necessary, and it is just making it absolutely insane. Jhin changes. It doesn't change the fact that Jhin's itemization and just all-around flow inside of the meta right now is not that great, so a little bit unfortunate for him. Xayah changes are completely fine. It's not going to stop players from picking Xayah. Kayle changes are extremely lackluster. It doesn't really touch on anything. It just feels like this was sort of thrown in there because they had intended to do a lot of Kayle changes, but there's not anything there at the end of the day. Lee Sin, base changes are quite massive for World's Misfortune is borderline viable in very small situations. Nunu and Willem sucks. Teemo, I don't understand why it's quality life change for Teemo, but apparently it's aiding his opposing team, and the mushroom thing is a complete placebo. Warwick sucks. Xayah change is really weird, but it's not the end of the world, and it's not going to stop people from picking Xayah, and the Zoe buff is really nice. So, now let's get to the most important part, which is the skins. Star Guardian Nico. It doesn't really doesn't stand out to me all that much. So no, I'm not. That one's not really winning me over. Star Guardian, Xayah, and Rakan. Now, I'm trying to imagine how this really feels. It sort of feels like, well, I get a Blood Elfy kind of vibe by the Rakan right here. But I imagine that these ones are like, I don't even know. They just live in the middle of the woods or something, and they do some weird-ass rituals and voodoo stuff, and they're just on all sorts of things. That's the vibe that I'm getting from that skin. Star Guardian Zoe. I'm getting a Jinx vibe. I'm getting like a Jinx's daughter vibe, so not really sure what's going on there. In the background, I see a very large beak or something with like wings. Maybe that's Swain or something, or it's probably not Swain, but nonetheless, this is a very Jinxy looking Zoe, and I don't think the skin is actually that bad. It's a very dark flavor, or a dark colored cotton candy ice cream. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? That's cotton candy ice cream is really nice. So that's the feeling that I get from seeing these colors put on the screen in this way. So this is really strange. Anyways, I don't know what this is over here. Is that a Poro or something? Why is it floating on a starfish? I'm not really sure what's going on there. Star Guardian, Rakan. Oh no. You know what though? This actually looks like Jeffree Star. Oh. Well, no, this doesn't look like Jeffree Star. This looks like Jeffree Star, though. This looks like Jeffree Star for sure, actually. If you guys don't know who Jeffree Star is, he's a pretty famous YouTuber that does, like, makeup and beauty stuff and whatnot. So, it just screamed Jeffree Star to me as soon as I clicked on the chroma. Star Guardian Xayah doesn't really say anything to me. This looks a lot like Jinx. This bottom one, this actually just looks like Jinx got a makeover for prom or something. So I'm not really quite sure what's going on there. And then Star Guardian Zoe. Okay, this is really strange. This is like you know Frankenstein's wife that has the really weird hair. Oh yeah, this one right here. Okay, this is like Frankenstein. Oh god, this is Frankenstein Zoe. I don't know what they are trying to lead you to believe with Star Guardians or anything, but this is definitely the daughter of all monsters, because this is really. I mean, I guess the Halloween skins are coming early. You know. All right. Well, that is going to do it for the patch 9.18 notes rundown, and hopefully you enjoyed it as much as this Poro is enjoying these snacks.